Welcome to the One Gang Worldwide podcast, your ultimate ride into the world of motorcycles. Visit cyclesworldwide.com where we offer a completely free marketplace for everything motorcycles. Join our One Gang community where you can connect, share info, and swap stories with riders from all over the world. Join for free at cyclesworldwide.com and be a part of the One Gang community right now.
On today's episode of the One Gang Worldwide podcast, we're joined by an industry OG and firecracker, Andrea Coleman, co-founder of Two Wheels for Life. This incredible organization harnesses the power of motorcycles to transform healthcare delivery in some of the world's most remote regions. Andrea will share how Two Wheels for Life began, the challenges they face in their mission, and the powerful impact of motorcycles on improving healthcare access. So get ready for the two-wheeled journey of saving lives with Andrea Coleman, right here on the One Gang podcast.
So we trained her, and she said, you know, this is what difference it's made to my life. When I didn't have a motorcycle, I had to tell my children I was leaving for a week, and I'd walk to one community, and then I'd walk to another community, and then I'd walk to another community, and I'd be back a week later. And she said in that week, I'd have walked over 100 miles.
One Gang Worldwide podcast, brought to you by Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping. Since 1978, Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping has been the trusted name in transporting motorcycles safely across the country. With custom-designed pallets and air ride trailers, your bike is secure and protected every step of the way. By choosing Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping, you're supporting a dedicated small business that prioritizes quality and customer satisfaction. Ship with a peace of mind, knowing your motorcycle is in expert hands.
Please visit shippingmymotorcycle.com. That's shippingmymotorcycle.com. And now, back to our show.
Well, we'd like to welcome Andrea Coleman to the One Gang Worldwide podcast. She is the founder and CEO of Two Wheels for Life and a co-founder of Riders for Health. We are so excited to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. We can't wait to hear your story.
Yep. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you both so much. It's a real pleasure and privilege to be invited. Thank you.
Well, it's an honor having you. We wanted to start in the early days and kind of ask about how and where you grew up and if there were any early things that sparked your passion for humanitarian work, and give us the intro.
Yeah, that really is an interesting question for me, and it's not something that I'm asked very often. So thank you for asking it.
Of course.
I was born actually in a town near to a place called Stevenage in Hertfordshire in the UK, because at that time the factory for Vincent motorcycles was at that place. And my father, Jack Williams, was one of the designers at Vincent. And of course, this was really not very long after the Second World War. So people were really, the motorcycle industry in Britain was at that time really growing and developing and producing some really special motorcycles. So my father was involved with the design and development of some of the famous Vincent motorcycles. So that
Very cool.
And we moved not long after that to that's north of London. Then we moved to the south of London when my father joined AMC, which is Associated Motorcycles, that produced the some of the very fast racing motorcycles of the time, the 7R, the G45, the G50, and they were sort of competing mainly with the Norton factory. So I grew up listening to my father, who was very single focused, about airflow and slide rules, and it was all to do with very technical things to do with motorcycles. And at the same time, the famous motorcycle racers of the time, people like Bob McIntyre, and would call at our house. I I remember one time sitting in the sort of warming cabinet of the towels, watching Bob McIntyre shaving. And so from the time I was very small, I was really fascinated by motorcycles, but knew that I was developing a sort of knowledge about the environment. And because my father was very focused on racing, he wasn't at home very much. So I don't have a memory very much of him as a father, but much more as someone whose legacy to me really was about motorcycles, technically, and motorcycles, racing motorcycles. So then my brother, Peter Williams, who eventually became a Grand Prix winner and TT winner,
Wow.
was very fascinated about the lightness of bicycles, and he was always working in the garage on drilling holes in the frames of his bicycles and doing slow bicycle races to kind of learn balance and so on. So that was another aspect, and I saw, and of course I gradually went from a very young age really to racetracks to watch racing, whether it was someone that was racing for my father or whether it was my brother's racing. And so I kind of learned the way it all works, the sort of the dynamics of both the racing itself, but also how the social and administrative side of racing works. And you're never aware that you're learning those things as you go along, but nevertheless, it kind of some process of immersion and osmosis. So then I used
Hey,
to
Andrew.
go with my brother Peter. Go on.
Oh, sorry. I
Did
didn't
you
mean
want
to
me to?
interrupt you. I wanted to ask you, do you have recollection of like getting on the back of your dad's bike, or did he ever try to teach you how to ride motorcycle anytime during your youth?
No, no. At that time, my brother wanted to race, and my father was worried about that. He thought that he needed to have some sort of other career. So my brother was actually 24 when he started racing. But actually, I think because my sister and I were girls, it never crossed his mind that we'd be interested in motorcycles. And even when I bought my first motorcycle when I was 16, my brother noticed and was very helpful. But my father kind of he was really completely obsessed with engines and
Right.
development of engines. And I mean, he was a very, very clever man. There's no doubt. But on the emotional or family side, he was pretty
Right,
pretty
right, right.
absent. So no, he wouldn't have been interested in what. No, he wouldn't have done that.
So,
Although
what
I
was your
do
first
remember
bike?
going. I had my first motorcycle was it was quite a mix. It had an Excelsior engine, a James gearbox, and a Villiers frame. So it cost £12, which I don't know, I don't know, very small amount in dollars. But it provided me with a way to learn to ride on the road, and
Awesome.
um, it was mine, and that meant a lot to me that I was able to go where I wanted to go and to learn to ride a motorcycle. And that's really all I wanted to do.
And what
And
did your
I
dad
really
say?
hate nothing.
Oh, so he
No,
wasn't like, I'm glad you got it, or no,
no, no,
nothing.
no, no, no.
Man,
I
he
don't think
was
he would have even
focused.
noticed. He was very focused.
Wow.
Um, No, in fact, I really, really hated school. I hated everything about it. So I didn't go to school very often, but I did go riding with um, some uh, some other bikers from the area, and that's really uh, when I look back on that, it was how I realized that because I'd been part of the motorcycle racing paddock and also the sort of development end with my father, it was when I was riding and going to all the biker cafes at the time
Right.
with all these people that I learned about the kind of the people who go and watch motorcycle racing. And when I think about what I do now, I can see all those elements were really important to kind of understanding the world of motorcycling, not just one part of it.
Yeah, sure.
That's awesome. So let me ask.
Yeah,
Oop,
so that was my go
that
on.
was your intro, right? That was your introduction with the motorcycles, and that's good that you, even though your dad didn't really necessarily talk to you about any of this or kind of influence you into this, it's cool that you still picked up a bike at 16, and I'm sure your brother was pretty cool with you too. I mean, he must have had some fun with you,
Was.
doing
Yeah,
some stuff. Did you
he
get
did.
you? What inspired you to establish?
Yeah, my brother actually, at a point, I think I must have been about 17, I think, a very, someone who developed into a very fast rider, Chas Mortimer, started a racing school. And my brother bought me some lessons at the Chas Mortimer Racing School. And in fact, my teacher at the time at that school was Paul Smart, who certainly went on to be very famous, great Ducati rider. So yeah, it was my brother encouraged me, and my sister,
Cool.
who was an artist, could never understand any of the motorcycle stuff. She wasn't interested in it. She didn't engage in it. She was kind of completely bewildered. So I got on very well with my sister, but we certainly thought very differently. Went in very different directions around motorcycling.
That's cool. That's cool. Let me ask you this. What inspired you guys to establish Riders for Health? How did you come up with that idea of using motorcycles to deliver health care in Africa? Like, how did that all come about? Because it's such an amazing thing what you guys did.
Yeah, thank you. Um, I'll just backtrack a little bit, if I
Please.
may.
Mhm.
I married a motorcycle racer called Tom Heron, and he was, in fact, it was odd for me because as I grew up in the motorcycle racing paddock, there were other kids growing up at the same time. One of whom was Barry Sheen, and so we were more or less the same age. And uh, as when Tom and I were married, Tom became a Suzuki Works rider, and he was riding at the same time as Barry Sheen in the same team and the same races. Tom was killed at the Northwest 200 in 1979, and but in the meantime, I'd got to know so many people in what was Grand Prix racing then, and I was very close friends with Kenny Roberts. He was really one of my dearest, and still is one of my dearest friends, and has really been so supportive to me all the time. And uh, after Tom died, two things happened. Well, many things happened, but two significant things to the current situation. Um, Randy Mamola's manager, Jim Doyle, asked me if I would do public relations for Randy. Randy, I'd met Randy a few times. He was just a kid when he first arrived. Of course, he was only about, I think he was 17. Just a freckly kid. He couldn't touch the floor with a 500 motorcycle. And but of course, Kenny was many times world champion already. I think Kenny and I became such good friends because he had his kids with him, Curtis and Chrissy, and I had my twins, Kim and Zoe, with me, and we sort of helped each other out with the children. I'm fascinated by Kenny that he was able to do so many domestic things and also win a world championship. How he did it, I'll never know. But anyway, that's Kenny Roberts for you. But I took the job with Randy, and I really got to a point. I think it was excuse me. It was because my life had been motorcycling, but it had been so destructive because of Tom's death. I really felt there was that I wanted to show that motorcycles could be a good thing, that they weren't just a destructive thing. And although they're fun, they can also be a force for good. And at that time, I was aware that after the Second World War, the motorcycle really enabled the workforce of Britain to kind of get up and running. I was also aware that though I love motorcycle racing, it really is literally going round and round in circles. And I felt that I wanted somehow to see a way of making motorcycles and motorcycle racing sort of do something bigger, to do something that wasn't so internally focused, that had a kind of creative aspect to it. And I also felt that I had what it took to persuade people to do something that they didn't necessarily want to do. So I started in a small way in 1986. I asked riders for some things, boots and gloves and all those sort of things. And I had a small auction. I think it raised something like €600 or something at the time. And I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with it. I knew I wanted it to do something, but then when I started working with Randy more closely, I realized that Randy, he's a very, very gifted person. He has he's gifted in so many different ways, but one of the things that he's so good at is talking to children. He's just magical at talking to children. He always knows what to say, how to say it. And so we started to do things with, to give children things that maybe they couldn't have, sort of like a visit to a racetrack or a visit with Randy visiting them in hospital and so on. But I don't know if you've met Randy, but if anything moves him, he cries. And he cried a lot. So I thought we can't really go visiting hospitals because he's more upset than the children. So we decided that we wanted to do something together. At that time, Kenny Roberts and the man I'm married to now, Barry Coleman, who was a Guardian journalist for the newspaper's Guardian here in Britain, had decided they would do a thing called World Series to change racing, to make it more professional, to make it safer for riders not to have to stand in line to get their money for their, for their riding and so on. So they'd been working on that. And I'd been working separately on trying to make racing in Northern Ireland safer. So we sort of joined forces in that way to highlight the dangers of motorcycling racing, but to make it safer. So Randy was very involved in that, and so was I, and Barry and Kenny, of course. And then, because of that, the prize money for racing at that time for professional riders like Randy was increased. And he said, well, look, I'll put that money towards what we're going to do. Rather than me taking it for myself, I'll give it to you, Andrea, to do whatever we think we should do to do good. So I did some more fundraising, some auctions and so on, and between us, we raised £20,000. And we decided that it should be an international charity. And I called Save the Children Fund and said, Randy's very interested in, supporting children. I'm very interested in why Africa at this time is so far, why people are starving and struggling in a way that the rest of the world doesn't seem to be. And so we decided on that, and Randy and I went to present the money to Princess Anne, who's the Queen's daughter, of course, the late Queen's daughter. And she said, have you ever been to Africa? Do you know why you're doing this? And we said, no, we don't know. We don't really understand it, but this is what we're drawn to. And she said, you need to go to Africa to have a look and see why, what you're interested in. So we went, Barry, my husband then, and Randy and I, and we saw women being taken to hospital in wheelbarrows when they were in obstetric difficulties, children trembling, shaking with malaria, and yet 20 miles away, there were ambulances and motorcycles that had very few miles on the clock. They were up on breeze blocks. They weren't being used simply because nobody had been trained to run and manage vehicles. And we said, okay, this is what we can do. We know about motorcycles. We know about vehicles. We know that how to train people to be mechanics, to think about supply chain, to think about changing oil filters or spark plugs or tires, or we can train people to be good riders of motorcycles. And that was really the start of it, that we realized that people were so isolated from healthcare simply because nobody knew how to run and manage vehicles. Nobody had ever been trained.
That must have been a
that was where we
huge
started.
shock, right? When you guys got to
Huge
Africa,
shock.
I mean, huge shock. I mean, coming from civilization that can take care of everything, and now seeing this, and
Absolutely.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it makes you realize, though, that when you see that, you realize just how much we take for granted, that we think that, a vehicle just keeps on running because it keeps on running. I mean, we all know, those of us on this particular podcast know that vehicles need maintenance, but the general public really thinks that they just kind of run, and that you take them in for a service, or somebody tells you they need a service. But people later, 2004, came to visit us and said, well, you're social entrepreneurs. And we said, that what? We don't know what a social entrepreneur is. They said, well, it's people who make money work in a different way from charity, and the money is earned, and then that it shows how you can work with something that's sustainable and something that will keep on going and help itself grow. And so we were we were really kind of quite shocked by that, because we knew we weren't a business, and we knew we weren't charity.
Right.
So we didn't really understand the difference. But it turns out that was a very important point for us, because we realized that you can make sure that you charge for services, that you train people, and you can make things last forever.
Andrea, can I ask you a question? When you guys determined that you saw the vehicle, the vehicles that you saw, the motorcycles and the auto vehicles that weren't being properly used, they were just sitting there. How were you guys able to, like, how did you go about? Because this is a pretty interesting question. I'm curious about is, first of all, how did you choose to train the people that you chose to train? And second of all, the vehicles and the motorcycles that were just there, did you have to buy it from them, or did they give them to you guys and said, "Hey, do your thing"? How did that work?
Well, that's also an interesting question. What happened first of all was that um, we started in Lesotho, which is a small country surrounded by South Africa, and at that point there had been some motorcycles donated um, to that to the Ministry of Health. 16 motorcycles. Um, they were actually Kawasaki's. We mainly use AG 200s and 100s now, which are made actually for the Australian sheep market apparently, but they're tough little bikes that are perfect. So those first ones were uh, given to us to maintain, but the people who rode them were Ministry of Health trained health workers. So that's public health workers, people who are making sure public health is addressed in rural communities, midwives, clinicians, um, and so on. And so we trained those riders to ride safely, defensively, make sure that they always wear the right protective clothing. They they learned right at the beginning a mnemonic called plans, petrol, lubrication, air, nuts and bolts, and stop, so that you check everything on a daily basis to make sure nothing's going to fall off. There are no
Right.
stones in the tires, that the clutch
Right.
cables and so on the chains not loose. So they do that on a daily basis, and then they learn to ride. And it's amazing to see women and men who are professional health workers. They've been to university, they know all about health, and all of a sudden they're bikers. It's just a thrill. We actually took Dougie Lampkin,
cool.
12 times trials world champion, to Lesotho recently. And he said, these guys aren't, these guys are trials riders. They just don't know they are. And so that was, that's fantastic. But in answer to your question about who owns the vehicles, in the very first place, we took on the vehicles that were owned by ministries of health. And of course, what you're getting then is a very, very mixed bag of vehicles that may be beyond their useful life. They may be halfway through and you can save them, or they may be relatively new. But of course, if you haven't done all the things that you should do, they're often very, they're towards the end of their useful life, even though they're relatively new. So we realized we did that really for the first 7 or 8 years. And then that model we call the transport asset management. So it's TRM, transport resource management. So that's somebody else's resource that Riders for Health manages. And of course, all the mechanics are highly trained. They're all locals of the countries in which we work. And so they would manage the motorcycles and the ambulances and make sure that everyone is trained as a rider and a driver to take care of that resource. But then we did try, together with an American organization called the Skull Foundation, based in Palo Alto in California, a model where we were able to buy the vehicles and then lease them on a full service basis to the Ministry of Health. So we were able to pay the money back over 3 years, and we were also able then to create a model that meant that you buy the right vehicles. You don't get a mixed fleet. You get all the same vehicles, so it's much easier to manage the replacement parts. That you can pack the vehicles. You know exactly how many miles they've done, when they need their service, when they need their tires changing, or whatever it is, because they're under our care and they're from new. And that model has turned out to be successful in that it means that the Ministry of Health know exactly what their budget has to be over a period of 4 years, but also they're able to know that they can build a strategy to reach every single man, woman, and child in their country, because they know those vehicles aren't going to break down. They know they're going to be able to do it, which is a very, very different picture from the one that we encountered in the first place. We're in 4 countries now, but we would like to be. Of course, we can replicate that model in other African countries, but it's quite hard to. We're in social enterprise. You're known to be as it were, people who can change a system. I believe that when it comes to managing vehicles, the ministries of health and NGOs that are focused on health, that you're really creating a system. You're not changing a system, because there is no system around them. So we believe that we set up a system, and that system can work anywhere. But there's quite a lot of resistance to change for all of us. It's a human thing. But to persuade whole ministries of health isn't always the easiest thing to do. But we're really working.
Thank you for answering that. I was really interested in finding out. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm curious if you could share from the early days of Riders for Health, if there's a memorable experience when it dawned on you that you're really going to make an impact. Was there a moment where you realized, wow, this really is working, this is really needed? And yeah, do you have specific examples of that?
Yeah, two of those. One was that a woman called Mahadi Lassa from Lesotho was a public health worker, highly trained, and she was just furious with her boss because she couldn't get out to her rural communities. She just, why have I done all this training? I can't take care of the people I serve. How am I? And just as it happened on that week, we arrived at that particular clinic and said, here are these motorcycles. We're really looking for health workers who are willing to learn to ride a motorcycle. This was in the very early days.
Wow.
And Mahadi stepped forward and said, yes, please. And
Wow.
she became our first health worker, mobilized health worker. But she then became a trainer of health workers, a trainer of trainers. And she's now the leadership of the program in Lesotho. And she's an amazing woman. But what it meant for her was that would change the lives of so many people in her nation, and that she was able to do it, but also train so many other men and women to do the same thing. So it was hugely transformative. And then we were working for a long time before all the political and social difficulties in Zimbabwe. And one day in a very remote area called Binga district, a woman came to where we were staying and said, "I've heard that you're Riders for Health. I'm a health worker. I was given 3 months ago a Suzuki motorcycle and it transformed my working life, but now it's broken and I don't know what to do about it." So we took the motorcycle to a Suzuki dealership. We were just on our own. We didn't have any of the local technicians with us. They 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 said, "This is this is very simple. This is something that really she just needed training for." So we trained her, and she said, "This is what difference it's made to my life. When I didn't have a motorcycle, I had to tell my children I was leaving for a week, and I'd walk to one community, and then I'd walk to another community, and then I'd walk to another community, and I'd be back a week later." And she said in that week, I'd have walked over 100 miles.
Wow.
And, you know, the idea of that kind of drives me nuts. And she said, sometimes I'd wait for a bus, but then the bus is broken down, so I don't get anywhere, and I've had to sleep at the bus stop. So in the end, I decided I'd just walk wherever I went. And that is happening all over Africa still, where Riders isn't working. So, the idea that a motorcycle doesn't run because somebody just is simply not trained to do their daily maintenance or to
Right.
learn to ride properly
Right. Yeah.
just drives me nuts. And, we know that in racing, it's a wonderful tool, a great, thrill. And people who ride on the road, it's a great joy. Sometimes too much of a toy, but in those circumstances, they really are saving lives. They're a tool to save lives, and you know, it's the other thing about a motorcycle, is that on those in those very remote communities, there are very few roads. I mean, there are roads between cities off the beaten track, as it were. Uh, they're just animal and people paths, and the motorcycle is a human scale. It's not a huge Toyota thundering through the landscape, kicking up dust. It's a really human scale vehicle, and there was one of our colleagues, Mpatsu Kuchule from Malawi, and she said, people always say that silence is golden, but if you're a woman in a remote rural community and you need help for your child, the sound of a single motorcycle coming into the village is the best thing you could ever hear. And it
Wow.
makes me really proud of motorcycles and motorcycling. It really does. And the motorcycle
Sure.
community does support us well.
Kind of piggybacking off that question, Riders for Health has been operational for several decades now. You've seen the organization since you founded it, or were one of the founders. You've seen it evolve over the years. What achievements are you most proud of? Like when you kind of be able to take a step back, sit down, because I know people like yourself who are always giving back and always looking to help people really have never taken a step back and said, hey, this is kind of cool or whatever. Like, well, what is that like for you when you kind of think about everything that you've put into this organization, you and others, of course, it's a team effort, but what are you most proud of when you really kind of reflect back when it's all said and done?
That's a hard question. It's an interesting question, but a hard one, because as you say, I don't think, you're always thinking, oh, there's so much more to be done, and we haven't done enough, and all those things. So I think I'd say maybe 4 things. One, one, of course, is that we can visit a remote rural community knowing that without Riders for Health, that community wouldn't have regular health care. And, that's transformative for any nation, that they have healthy people in rural areas, because, people can get healthcare with difficulty from the city. But out there in those rural communities, you're isolated. And, you know, just very quickly mentioning my childhood, because my father was so absorbed in what he did, my mum was very isolated. And often when I'm in rural Africa, I see women who are not able to be engaged in the world in a, in the way they ought to be. They're clever women, but they're just doing subsistence farming, or they're isolated from all sorts of things. And to know that the motorcycle can do that is a great thrill for me. I think the idea we one of our biggest fundraisers of the year is our Day of Champions, which is just the day before the MotoGP in Britain starts in August. And we've now been doing Day of Champions for 35 years.
Wow.
And, to have a major part of a motorcycle event, particularly MotoGP, is for someone who grew up in it and kind of admired those, extraordinary riders of the time. To be part of that is, for me, just as a personal thing,
Sure, of course.
is a great thrill. And then we had our Gambia team called me recently and said they'd had a call from um, uh, a father whose wife and twins had been saved because they got to hospital in time.
Wow.
And you could never get over that. I mean, the idea that's so personal.
Okay.
You when you talk about people in rural communities, it's very, it's almost a statistic. But when somebody calls and says thank you, for my wife and my twins, you couldn't ever forget that, because that's so personal. You know their names, everything about them. And so for me, that's very, very, very valuable. Then something I'm proud of as well is that we've all been able to speak well of motorcycling. At a conference recently, I was able to tell Bill Gates about Riders for Health and the work of motorcycles. And you
Really?
think, yeah, I can tell people that people who are influential in the world, even if they don't do anything about it, they know about motorcycle
Good for you.
motorcycles
Good for you.
saving lives, and I'm proud of that.
That's really cool. And so in 2016, was it, you've brought Two Wheels for Life into the picture, and so you're kind of melding the two worlds of healthcare and motorsports. What inspired you to take that step? And not only what inspired you, but how did you get the idea, really?
Well, for a long time, right from the start of Riders for Health, we've always made sure that the programs are run and managed by people from the Africa programs and not by us. We don't do a command and control system. It must be that we are supporters of theirs, and that they make the decisions, and of course with our guidance and advice, but that they must be run and managed by them. And that, of course, we make sure that their programs are audited, and that we have all the reports and so on. But we never wanted to be in a position where for example, if we changed our minds and did something else, it wouldn't all collapse. That this
Right.
had to be grown, deeply rooted in Africa, and not at the vagaries of people from other countries. So in 2016, we decided that the best thing to do was to, and I have to say, it was really hard. It's probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do, as it were, uh, uh, intellectually coupled with emotionally, to kind of step back from Riders for Health and to say, right, so all the leadership, Riders for Health is going to be all African, and we'll start an organization that really focuses on broadening the base of fundraising. So it goes across all different kinds of motorcycling, including, enduro and trials and so on. And that we will put that money, raise that money to support the programs in ways that they can't, that out of the money they earn from ministries of health and so on, that they can't afford: digital development, impact measurement, training leadership, speaker training, all those things that enable the people in the programs to really take that to a global level.
Right.
So I stepped down as CEO, and of course I'm still the founder, but it's been hard to put the two organizations together in a way that really works. In the last 2 years, we've really kind of realized that we got there, that the Riders for Health teams know exactly what their responsibilities and their development issues are, and what Two Wheels for Life does, and what our role is in their development and continuation. So it took 4 years of kind of back and forth, but it's really interesting because so many organizations now that work across the world as NGOs ask us, how do you, as they describe it, which it's not a word I care for much, how do you decolonize your organization? And we say, well, really, we've never made it so that it had the developed world directing the South, as it were. But nevertheless, until 2016, we were still seen by ourselves and by the Africa teams as kind of almost being in charge, and that wasn't right. So it was hard to. I've recently started together with two other social entrepreneurs, um, uh, a social enterprise called the Elders Council for Social Entrepreneurs, and it's to help people to move on. Because if you start something because you really believe in it and it becomes your life, it's so hard to extract yourself from it. Who are you if you're not your organization? And of course, entrepreneurs, straightforward entrepreneurs, leave with a load of money. They come away with money, whereas social entrepreneurs, they move out of being the CEO and they don't have any money, and they usually
Right.
don't have. It's a huge loss. So we've started this to sort of help people to plan for that, both emotionally and financially, so that when they have put their whole lives into something, they don't sort of end up in feeling broken and with no financial support. So I did find it hard to say, who am I if I'm not Riders for Health? But actually, now that we've done the work that we have done in bringing it all together, I'm very happy to say I'm the co-founder of Riders, and this is the new leadership. It took a while for me to be able without crying. But I got there.
That's cool. That's cool.
Hey guys, the show will be back in 1 minute right after a word from our sponsor.
Hey, One Gang, tired of feeling like your butt's taking more of a beating than your bike on those long rides? Introducing Butt Buffer, the ultimate solution to saddle soreness. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. These cushions are made from medical-grade viscoelastic polymer, scientifically crafted to eliminate pressure points and keep your circulation flowing. No more numb nuts or numb butts. And here's the best part. Butt Buffer cushions are made right here in the U.S. for the last 30 years. From Harleys to Hondas, we've got a cushion to fit your ride perfectly. Plus, with styles ranging from sleek pebble polymer to luxurious sheepskin, there's a Butt Buffer for every rider's style. Get your Butt Buffer today at buttbuffer.com. That's buttbuffer.com. Your butt will thank you, and you'll ride longer and happier. We've got your butt covered.
So, can you share any other stories that highlight the resilience and dedication of these healthcare workers that are obviously motivated to learn how to ride, but also how to maintain? I know you had mentioned Mahadi learning and being able to ride instead of walk is a great motivator beyond the most important thing of being able to help people. What other examples do you have for these healthcare workers?
Well, I was in Lesotho recently, and I was actually I was introduced to two people in a clinic. One of them was a clinician, there's a surgeon of some note, and a midwife, and they were talking to me about the work that they do, uh, and how important their work is. And you know that these people are highly trained medical people. They see really difficult things all the time, and they're saving lives in the most difficult circumstances. And towards the end of the conversation, they said, well, we have to go now. And what was fascinating is that if you were in the developed world, they'd go off in their, I don't know, Mercedes or BMW or something. These guys put their helmets on, got their boots on, got their Riders for Health kit on, and got on their 200cc AG 200 Yamahas and rode away into the rural communities. And I just thought, this is really extraordinary that these people can't do their jobs without a
Right.
motorcycle.
Right.
But I think the health workers will all tell you stories about how their motorcycle has enabled them to make sure they go to communities to give nutrition to small babies and to address issues for under fives. And uh, I think really it's really hard. It's really hard to sort of say. But I was at a hospital in Lesotho again, in a very remote area, and we do run ambulances there as well, and they take people to hospital over very, very rough terrain. But that ambulance is so busy, it kind of has to go down to the city maybe 3 or 4 times a day. And it's hard to, it really sort of resonates with Sergi's question about who owns these vehicles, because of course the ministries of health will only be able to afford a certain number of vehicles, and it's not enough. They're never enough ambulances. And then for us, when you see what a motorcycle can do and how it can reach people regularly and do diagnosis and on all those different things, we have well, I'll go back to that issue. But you also know that ambulances are critical for all sorts of things, particularly pregnant women. And we're always thinking, should we be buying ambulances for our programs? But of course, we couldn't afford to buy the number of ambulances they need. So just to keep going and making sure that those that they have are regularly maintained and properly maintained and won't break down is really important to us. So um, there, one of the services we provide is a sample transport program where the motorcycles and riders are dedicated to doing a route every day, that they go to several clinics and then take the samples to the lab
Right.
to be diagnosed for people. And both vaccine and samples for diagnosis are very vulnerable to time, heat, vibration, and uh, time, heat, vibration, and yeah. So we have to make sure that all those vaccines and any samples are transported very, very carefully. And the labs will tell you that before Riders for Health was there, the lab director recently told us that the volume of samples has gone up massively because women and men, of course, will walk to get their samples done at a clinic if they know they're going to get the result back. Because if they, in the past, if they walk to a clinic, that sample might sit on a shelf because there's nobody to take it to the lab to get it
Of course.
to get it to a diagnosis done on it. So the volume of samples has gone up massively, which means that people are going to get diagnosed. And then because of the system that we run on a daily basis, people get their results back very quickly, and then they can be put on treatment very quickly. And
Gotcha.
that makes a huge difference to,
sure.
Lesotho has a huge HIV burden. And so, particularly in what's called PMTCT, the diagnosis for the mother of HIV, and then the mother can be put on a certain treatment so that the baby isn't infected with HIV. That's massively important, and that's changed because of the motorcycle and those health workers. One other thing, just talking about HIV, there were 5 women. There are 5 women in Kenya who asked us. They actually run for a faith-based organization, but they called us and said, "Oh, that they're 5 HIV positive women. They're in Kenya. They work for a faith-based organization, and they wanted to make sure that with all their knowledge and training, they could go out to rural communities to talk to HIV positive women about nutrition, about stigma, about not passing on HIV to their babies, and so on." And a colleague and I went to train these 5 women and to ride. And of course, they wore all their protective clothing. And 3 months later, I went back to visit the program. And these 5 women were great bikers. I mean, they were like trials riders. They were really amazing. And just the gift in a way of um, people who don't have any recognition. They have a lot of stigma to face. And the motorcycle just made them feel so different. They were able to do their work, but they're suddenly respected in their communities because they're able to ride motorcycles. They're able to do their job. They're more important in their communities. So, there are so many stories about how women in particular, their status changes in their communities because they're riders for health workers.
Andrea, can I ask you a question? This is kind of important. Now that you guys are growing and obviously there's more involvement in the old school days, obviously before technology was what it is now, was a lot harder with communication, things like that. What role do you see technology playing in the future of healthcare logistics in Africa, and how is Riders for Health adapting to kind of like incorporate all this stuff to make life a little bit easier for everybody and faster to make decisions and things like that? Can you take us a little bit into that?
Yes, we've recently added digital um, processes to everything that Riders for Health does. In fact, our digital guru went through all that with us this morning to show that we're doing vehicle trackings to think about being able to see whether people are speeding or if they're how far they're going, and if they're using their vehicle for the purpose that they need to, which of course
Right.
they always do. Um, we've got the data now to show how many samples are being moved, where they're being moved to. We have digital now that shows us what the stock levels are in all the workshops, what
Wow.
when
Nice.
stock needs to be replaced, and we've got we're able now for the managers of each of the programs to look on a dashboard to see all those things at a glance. And one of the great things about it, we've been struggling. One of the things we've been struggling with is how to look at all the various pieces of data coming in from, whether it's to do with the managing the vehicles, managing the journey planning, managing the samples, managing
Right.
the health workers themselves. And one of the digital companies that we're working on yesterday called and said they want to test a chat bot with us so that we can ask all the data what we need to know, and it'll just tell us. And we're sort of almost dancing around the office saying, this is just, we've waited for this for so long.
That's
So
awesome.
yes, we're definitely moving along with that.
Good.
But one of the issues is that people often think that the mobile phone or the smartphone um, or the drone is the answer to everything in terms of mobility, that you can have a sick person in a very remote community, call a doctor and they'll kind of talk you through it, or you need a delivery of something, so they'll send a drone to do it. And there's no doubt that drones and digital and data are critical, but without the physical movement of goods and services and people, you're really not providing proper service, because people need to see people. They need to. There are psychological and emotional issues around healthcare, as well as just being able to drop a box of pills or whatever it is. So that what we believe is that it needs a a a very um, uh, a whole range of things that are put together, including four-wheel vehicles, which are trekking vehicles to take goods,
Right.
and
Right.
that we need motorcycles for outreach visits and very rapid transport of things, and we need ambulances, of course, for women. We need drones for when in winter in the mountains in Lesotho, nobody can get up those, not even the horses can get up there, let alone the motorcycles. And so drones are very useful in some circumstances, and
That's
um,
cool.
and digital has to go with everything. And we've committed quite a lot of resources to turning riders into a digitally supported and observed organization.
That's awesome.
Hmm.
That's awesome. I
So
love it.
I'm curious. It's not like a competitive realm to be in humanitarian work. It's kind of the opposite. And I'm curious what advice you would give for people or a group of people who are looking to follow in your footsteps and make an impact through humanitarian work in the healthcare sector. What do you like a roadmap? What main suggestions would you give those folks?
Yeah, I think like any kind of entrepreneurial venture, that you will see a gap. I mean, one of the things that happens, as I'm sure you know, when there's a disaster, 100 NGOs start up, that are all doing the same thing. So then that's competitive.
Yeah.
That's not good. So, but seeing a gap where your expertise or knowledge or belief will make a difference. We have friends who are doing things to do with human trafficking and to do with, creating common ground where there is none, and so on. So seeing gaps in the health systems or where there are no systems is really key to that. But also collaboration is really important. I think it's hard with anything driven by human beings not to be competitive, because fundraising, for example, is incredibly competitive. We're all after the
Sure.
same dollar, and how you tell the story, or how it appeals to a donor or a grant giver or a philanthropist is really key to that. So and it also, I think, encourages you to prepare your story, as it were, your sales pitch, that to
Mhm.
well, and also be absolutely true to what you say you're going to be doing. I think that's vital. But I also think you have to think about yourself a lot more than many of us have done in the past. That you do have to think about um, burnout and all those things. Because if people put themselves into something, they can be so focused that they can, burn out or ruin their marriage or
Right.
something. So I think you have to think about what your mission is, um, where the source of funding will come from. And of course, I would always encourage people to earn the money, um, as well as look for grants and philanthropic um, areas.
Mhm.
Because then if donors or philanthropists change their minds, you're not vulnerable then, not as vulnerable as you would be if you're not able to earn any of your income. So I think that's important, but I would encourage people to think of people who think about other people so much often neglect themselves. So I think it's important with anybody who is thinking of starting um, a humanitarian venture to think about, of course, about the structure, the strategic plan, where the money's coming
Mhm.
from, proving your concept, but also to think, how do I care for myself and my staff and my family and, all that.
Great advice. Yeah.
You had
Great advice.
your organization has got some amazing people who back it. You've got some great sponsors from the MotoGP. I mean, you have some big time names. Was that your involvement? Were you the person out there getting this stuff? Because I know that you came up with other people from the industry who helped start this. So is it the connections that helped you get this? Because it's awesome to see, like, you see racers and they've got your logo on there, and then banners with your logo and major events. I mean, that's a huge accomplishment in my opinion. I mean, for a nonprofit company, how were you able to succeed with this?
I uh, I think persistence is one thing, and
Mhm.
trust
Right.
is another. Because you just have to keep. I can remember a long time ago, Kenny Roberts had a physical trainer called Dean Miller, and he was he was always very kind to me. But I remember um, bumping him into the paddock I think I was in Jerez, and saying, "I'm never going to get anywhere. I just know that I'm beating my head against the wall. I'm just never. And I was actually, but you have to just keep on persisting, telling the story. But I think to stay there, you have to, people have to trust you. And I think trust is absolutely key to that,
Mhm.
because, you know, you don't want ever to go somewhere and feel like an idiot because you've given an organization some money and they've either misspent
Right.
it or done
Right.
something crazy with it or something. So I think persistence and trust, I would say, are one thing. Telling the story so that people feel the can identify with that person, or feel, give them a story that enables them to feel what you have seen,
For sure.
and what that person, why that person or those people need your help. And then, of course, there are another group of people who love the idea of motorcycles doing a good thing. You know, I mean, there are a lot of people who feel, you know, that's um, it's good to see something technical making a, a making a difference,
Right.
making a good difference. And so I think there are those people, and then I think
Yep.
there are also people who um, believe in you as an individual. They think, you know, you're not going to do something wrong or bad. So it's that. Um, and then also creating an organization that people can feel proud to be part of. I mean, we've got so many volunteers, and
Yeah.
I always hope that we're able to give them as much back as they give to us. So
That's awesome.
hmm, so I think it's
You,
that really.
you have what's cool is one of the things doing research on your organization about you've got some great people coming on board too, and the way I think you were able to recruit them was actually getting them out to that place and get them to Africa and see it with their own eyes so they can
Absolutely.
better understand it. I mean, you can talk about everything all day long, but until you physically see it with your own eyes, you really don't understand the severity of what these people go through on a day to day. So that's been a major
Yeah.
accomplishment on your end. And you guys have been recruiting some excellent people to come on board and help you guys out, right?
Yeah, we really have been lucky with that, and some people who've really been able to have a look at the work and see that we really do what we say we do, and see that the environment is just what we say it is. And
Right.
then they're able to go away and influence other people. But there have been so many people, I mean, really so many, who have been on that, visited the programs and have said, I've met 3 or 4 recently who said, "That visit changed my life. I've been a different person since I went with
Course.
Riders for
Of
Health
course.
to Africa." So, you know, so many things. There are so many things in the world that kind of come at us, you know, um, and change our lives, not for the better, but, you know, just to feel that you've created something that where people are able to feel this has made a difference to my life for the good. That, and the
Andrea, can I
other
ask you a
thing, of course,
question?
go on ahead.
No, no, no. Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it was just that my daughter Zoe is now working with us, and she's really great at she's she's brought Yamaha on board with us, and
Wow.
because although we use the Yamahas all the time, they've never kind of been Yamaha have never been that interested, and there are all sorts of reasons that I'm sure you and I know about the competition from Chinese motorcycles and so on,
Sure.
about why Japanese motorcycle manufacturers need to sort of look at things differently. But Yamaha have been incredibly supportive and of late. And that's because of the relationship that Zoe has built with them, once again, out of trust and an alignment uh, of the way people see the world. So that's been really helpful, and it's been because of one of our trustees and Zoe, a combination of the two, that Vanessa Rakand, also the young woman called Itchy Boots, has been so supportive of us lately. Noralie, I think her name's Noralie. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, like, sitting here now, right, and all the hard work that you've put in into this, and the things that the contacts you've made, the people that have helped. At this point, what is the long-term goal for you with this organization long after we're all gone? Like, where do you see this, let's say 10 years down the road? And it's not long before we're gone. I'm just giving a 10-year.
I was going to say, do you know something I don't?
No. I didn't mean for it to sound like that. My bad on that. Sorry. I was just saying, like, further down.
Well, I think that's why we've always planned it to be deeply rooted in the African programs, to really work with the people who lead it now in Africa on their succession, how they plan for their succession, who leads those organizations from now on, and also having regular audits of the programs to make sure that the standards are always high, but not in a way that is intended or designed to be critical, but just to always have a certain level in all the things to do with the communication with ministries, other NGOs, the way the stores are run, the way the motorcycles are run, just so that everybody can observe that the standards are high and that they are owned by the programs in Africa, so they feel that ownership. And I think the ownership and leadership issues are part of what makes it able to last, because then people take that personally. They want, for themselves, they want to see that grow and develop and survive. I think also just having identifiable systems that you're able to describe and put on paper, well, not on paper, but on the computer, and to make sure that people know what that system is and know what it is that works, and being able to describe the impact so that people want to continue to have that impact on the health of their nation. So I think all those elements are important. But okay, I do think that ownership and leadership is really, really critical.
Thank you for answering that.
All right. So before we get into the speed round here, Andrea, I wanted to ask you, for people looking to support and get involved and follow along with what's going on, where can people find you? And we'll add these in the show notes as well. We'll add links.
Well, thank you. I am grateful to you for that. One of the when I was CEO of Riders for Health, I registered Riders for Health as a 501c3 in the United States, and we have a little office there in Maryland, partly run by a very sweet man. He's actually a lawyer, but he always takes our stuff very, very seriously. And he's very kind. So we do have a US office, but if people can be in touch with me, um, and I can just give you my email address, or people can get hold of us at info@ridersforhealth.org, or just at my email address, one or the other. And then, of course, www.riders.org or www.twowheelsforlife.org. But Zoe is just putting up on both the Two Wheels and the Riders for Health websites a description of how the two organizations fit together, so that people aren't confused, because it has been hard for people to kind of see, well, what's the connection? But now we've got a very good description of that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good on the website, nice and clear. All right, you ready
But
for a few
I'd
fun questions?
really want to. Yeah, well, I do really want to. I think that there are a lot of people in the United States, particularly motorcyclists, who would like to support our work, and I'd like to sort of reinstate it, because we were doing really well with funding from the US up until 2016, but because of us becoming two and then one, it confused people.
Right.
So, and also because I've been so busy building Two Wheels for Life, I wasn't able to put as much time and effort into building Riders for Health in the US back up
Riders for
again.
Health.
So
Sure.
I really
Makes sense.
appreciate your offer to help. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, 100%. Very cool. It's nice for people to hear that too, straight from your mouth. You know, it adds some clarity right there. And now that section, I saw the whole page on your site that gives a great description, a few paragraphs of how the companies are intertwined. So that was cool. It was able to help me very quickly figure out what the incorporation was there.
Oh, that's great.
All right,
Thank
you ready for some fun speed round questions?
Go on then.
All right, cool. Let's get the 2 minutes on the clock. All right. Okay, so what's the best or your favorite motorcycle you've ever owned or ridden?
I really enjoyed riding the Suzuki Super 6, which isn't easy to say for someone with the lisp. But I raced that motorcycle in 1972, and in comparison with anything else I'd ever ridden, it was incredible. And of course, I've ridden other motorcycles, but that was just the comparison at that time of what I'd ridden and just riding that. So that was a great motorcycle.
Very cool. All right. If your motorcycle could talk, what would it say about you?
That I should probably think about, getting my knee down, but I'm not going to.
That's funny. That's awesome.
Cool. Best place you've ever ridden and why?
Oh, in Lesotho. It is God's own motorcycle country. It is beautiful. And Lesotho, without a doubt.
Okay, cool.
That's awesome. I'll be looking that up. If you could time travel, which era would you visit?
That's a very good question. Well, healthcare is always on my mind. So probably, I don't know, probably the future. To see
Cool.
to see how the programs are going, and seeing if people can sort themselves out and think about people's health and well-being. Put that first.
That's cool. Cool answer. Favorite motorcycle movie of all time?
Oh, On Any Sunday.
All right.
Nice. Classic.
That's
Very
cool.
cool.
Oh, without a doubt. I watch that all the time. Bruce Brown.
Nice.
I met his kids and they were amazing.
Oh, cool. That's really cool. All right, here's a maybe difficult one to answer. If you could meet any person, past or present, and have dinner with them, who would it be?
Well, I actually think that Benjamin Franklin would have been very interested in our work and would have been very helpful because, boy, he was a clever man and came up with so many amazing inventions. And I think he'd just be very interesting in terms of, past and what he thought the present might be, what the future might be. So,
Sure.
yeah, Benjamin Franklin.
That's awesome.
That'd be a cool one. Okay, if you were president and you could change one law, what would it be to impact the motorcycle community?
Oh. Well, I suppose it would have, realistically, it would have to be about duty, duties imposed upon the motorcycle community in terms of, government duties. So I don't know enough about the US support or otherwise of motorcycling. But if we were talking about the UK, I would certainly want to make more rules to show that motorcycles are both are better for the environment, better for traffic management and so on. So I just make it so that people were more attracted to buying motorcycles.
Good. That's a great one.
Cool. Definitely. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Well, it's a counter piece of advice. When I talk to people about starting Riders for Health, they said, whatever you do, don't do it. It'll never work. And it really inspired me to do it and make it work. So
That's awesome.
It's a backwards.
Don't
thing,
listen to
but I
other
think
people's
that's
advice.
Yeah.
Well, and also it's a kind of motorcyclist answer, isn't it? Because we're so bloody minded.
Mhm.
That's cool.
All right, here's a fun one. If there was a biker themed movie about you, who would play Andrea?
Oh, well, I'd be very. I'd of course ask Vanessa Ruck to do that because I think she'd be able
Nice.
to.
That's why. Wait
Do
till she
things that I
hears
could
this. She's
never
gonna be
even-
so good.
She could do things that I could never dream of doing. So,
She's
yeah,
all
Vanessa.
She is.
All right, cool.
That's awesome. Great answer. Okay, here's a fun one. Do you have any silly superstitions that you do before or after a ride?
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Okay,
No.
easy enough.
That's easy enough.
Just
Sure.
a purist. Perfect. All right, last question. Besides the One Gang Worldwide podcast, what other podcasts are your top 3 or favorite if you have one?
And it's okay.
Don't
One gang is enough.
One gang.
Yeah.
One gang is my only one, and it will always be
Perfect.
my only one.
That's a perfect answer right there.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Cool. You made it through.
Yeah.
Andrea,
All
maybe-
right.
we just want to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts of you taking your time to not only come on our show, but the thanks really is for the things that you're doing, the things that you give back. Just ever since you've started, and any history on you is always you doing something to help others. So more people need to read your biography and find out more about you too. I think it would help them give a clearer path in their own lives. So keep up the amazing work that you're doing. We're humongous fans, and we hope that we get a chance to meet you face to face one day if you come to the States or we go to the UK.
Well, I really have enjoyed it, and I really think of you both as good friends of mine. And thank you so much. I think what you're doing
Amen.
is brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. Really appreciate it. Have a great
Yeah.
day, and we're looking forward to hearing more down the road.
Thank you. You're brilliant. Thank you again.
Take care.
And you.